The old woman said, "I can't close my legs." The cowboy reached down and discovered something shocking. The wind moved slowly across the dry land as the sun began to sink behind the tall hills. Dust floated through the air of the small western town of Red Creek. It was a kind of quiet evening that cowboys knew well. Long shadows, cool air, and the distant sound of horses. Ethan Cole rode his brown horse along the lonely dirt road outside the town. Ethan was known as a calm and honest cowboy. He worked hard at the nearby ranch and rarely caused trouble. After a long day fixing fences and checking cattle, he was finally heading back home. His horse, Ranger, walked slowly, tired from the long ride. Ethan looked around at the empty land. The desert stretched far, in every direction. The only sounds were the wind and the soft steps of Ranger's hooves on the road. Then suddenly, Ranger stopped. Ethan frowned. "Easy, boy," he said softly while holding the reins. Ranger did not move. Ethan looked ahead and noticed something strange near the side of the road. At first, it looked like a pile of old clothes sitting in the dust. But when he focused his eyes, he realized it was a person, an old woman. She was sitting on the ground near a small patch of dry grass. Her gray hair was messy, and her dress was covered with dust. She looked tired and worried. Ethan quickly climbed down from his horse. "Ma'am," he called out as he walked closer. The old woman slowly looked up at him. Her face was full of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Oh, thank goodness," she said in a weak voice. "I thought no one would come." Ethan knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked. The old woman shook her head. "I've been stuck here for hours," she said. Ethan looked confused. "Stuck?" he asked. The old woman sighed and looked embarrassed. "Son," she said quietly, "I can't close my legs." Ethan blinked in surprise. He was not expecting those words. But the old woman did not look like she was joking. She looked uncomfortable and worried. Ethan quickly pushed away his confusion and focused on helping her. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "Let's figure out what's wrong." He carefully looked around her. She was sitting in a strange position, almost frozen, like she was afraid to move. "Did you fall?" Ethan asked. "No," she said. "I was walking through the grass to collect some firewood. Then suddenly something caught my dress. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't move right." Ethan looked closer at the ground beneath her. The dirt was uneven, and patches of dry grass covered parts of the area. It looked like the kind of place where hunters sometimes place small traps for animals. "Hold still," Ethan said gently. The old woman nodded. Ethan slowly crouched lower and carefully checked near the bottom of her dress. He didn't want to scare her or make things worse. For a moment, he saw nothing unusual. Then something shiny caught his eye in the dirt, a piece of metal. Ethan brushed away some dust with his hand. As the dirt cleared, he saw the edge of a small metal trap, partly buried in the ground. His eyes widened. "Well, that explains it," he said quietly. The trap had snapped shut around the bottom of the woman's dress fabric. It had not hurt her leg, but the cloth was tightly stuck in the metal jaws. "That thing grabbed my dress when I stepped over it," the old woman said. "I tried pulling away, but it wouldn't let go." Ethan nodded. "Good thing it caught the cloth and not your leg," he said. The old woman gave a nervous laugh. "I guess I was lucky." Ethan carefully reached toward the trap. "Don't worry," he said. "I'll open it." But just as he moved some more dirt away from the metal trap, something else appeared beside it, a small brown leather pouch. It was half buried in the ground, hidden under the dust and grass. Ethan paused. "That's strange," he murmured. The old woman leaned forward slightly. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan picked up the pouch and brushed the dirt off it. The leather looked old and worn, like it had been lying there for many years. "I don't know," he said. Slowly, he opened the pouch. The moment he looked inside, his expression changed. His eyes grew wide with shock. "Well, I'll be," Ethan whispered. The old woman stared at him nervously. "What did you find?" she asked. Ethan slowly lifted his head and looked at her. "I think," he said carefully, "you and I just stumbled onto something very unusual." The evening air grew cooler as the sun slowly disappeared behind the hills. The land around the dusty road became quiet, and long shadows stretched across the ground. Ethan Cole still knelt beside the old woman, holding the small leather pouch in his hand. The look on his face had changed completely. Inside the pouch were several round gold coins. They were old, heavy, and covered with dirt. Ethan had seen coins before in town stores and banks, but these looked very different. The metal had a deep yellow shine even under the dust, and strange markings were carved on their surfaces. The old woman stared at him. "Well," she asked nervously, "what's inside it?" Ethan slowly turned the pouch so she could see. "Gold coins," he said quietly. The old woman's eyes widened. "Gold," she repeated. Ethan nodded. He carefully poured a few coins into his hand. They clinked softly against each other. Even in the fading light, they shined brightly. "I've never seen coins like these before," Ethan said. "They look very old." The old woman leaned closer, but she still couldn't move much because the trap was holding her dress tightly. "That pouch isn't mine," she said quickly. "I swear I've never seen it before." "I believe you," Ethan replied. He looked around the ground again. The trap was still holding the bottom of her dress cloth, and it needed to be opened before she could move. Ethan placed the pouch safely beside him. "Let's get you free first," he said. The old woman nodded with relief. Ethan brushed away more dirt from the trap. It was a small metal animal trap, the kind hunters sometimes use for rabbits or foxes. Luckily, it had caught only the cloth of the woman's dress. "Stay very still," Ethan told her. He carefully pressed down on the metal springs of the trap. The metal was rusty, and it made a small creaking sound. For a moment, it refused to move. Ethan took a deep breath and pushed harder. Finally, click! The metal jaws slowly opened. The cloth of the dress slipped free. "You're free," Ethan said with a small smile. The old woman carefully moved her legs for the first time in hours. "Oh, thank goodness," she sighed with relief. She slowly stood up with Ethan's help. Her legs were stiff, but she was able to stand. "My name is Martha," the old woman said, while brushing dust from her dress. "Martha Bell." "Nice to meet you, ma'am," Ethan said politely. "I'm Ethan Cole." Martha looked down at the trap on the ground. "That thing gave me quite a scare," she said. Ethan nodded. "Whoever placed it here should have marked it better," he said. "Someone could get seriously hurt." Martha then looked at the leather pouch again. "What about that?" she asked. Ethan picked it up again and examined it carefully. The leather felt dry and cracked, like it had been buried for many years. The stitching on the sides was worn, and the small string that closed it looked fragile. "There's more than just coins in here," Ethan said. He reached inside again. This time he pulled out a folded piece of paper. The paper looked very old and yellow. The edges were rough, and parts of it were slightly torn. "A letter?" Martha asked. "Not exactly," Ethan said. He slowly unfolded it. The paper revealed strange lines and drawings. It was a map. Ethan stared at it for several seconds. The map showed hills, rivers, and small marks that looked like landmarks. Some words were written in faded ink, and one symbol looked like a large X. Martha stepped closer. "Is that a treasure map?" she asked half jokingly. Ethan didn't laugh. "I'm not sure," he said, "but it definitely looks like a map of this area." He pointed at one part of the drawing. "Look here," he said. "That looks like Red Creek Town." Martha leaned closer and squinted her eyes. "I think you're right," she said. Ethan's mind began racing with questions. Who buried this pouch? How long had it been hidden there? And why was it placed right next to the trap? He carefully folded the map again and placed it back into the pouch. The quiet road suddenly felt much more mysterious. Martha crossed her arms and looked out at the empty land. "You know," she said slowly, "people around here still tell stories about old outlaws." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What kind of stories?" "Hidden gold," Martha replied. "Bandits who robbed banks long ago and buried their money before disappearing." Ethan looked down at the pouch again. The coins clinked softly inside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the dry grass, making a soft, whispering sound. Finally, Martha broke the silence. "So what do we do now?" she asked. Ethan looked toward the distant lights of Red Creek Town. The smart thing would be to take the pouch to the town sheriff. But something about the map made him curious. Very curious. He looked back at Martha. "I think," Ethan said slowly. We may have just found the beginning of a very strange mystery. The sky had turned dark blue as night slowly arrived over quiet land near Red Creek. The wind had become colder, and the stars began to appear one by one above the wide western sky. Ethan Cole and Martha Bell stood beside the dusty road, both thinking about the strange things they had just discovered. The leather pouch felt heavy in Ethan's hand. Inside were old gold coins and a mysterious map. Ethan looked toward the town in the distance. A few small lights could be seen from houses and shops. We shouldn't stay out here too long, Ethan said calmly. It's getting dark. Martha nodded. Yes, and my legs are still a little shaky, she said with a tired smile. Ethan walked over to his horse, Ranger, and gently tied the leather pouch to his saddle. We'll take this back to town, Ethan said. Somewhere safe. Martha looked curious. You mean the sheriff's office? She asked. Ethan thought for a moment. Maybe, he replied. But first, I want to take another look at that map. Martha raised her eyebrows. You think it's really something important? Ethan untied the pouch again and carefully removed the folded map. Under the soft light of the rising moon, he slowly opened the old paper. The faded drawing was easier to see now. Lines marked hills, rivers, and rocky areas. Some of the places looked familiar to Ethan because he had ridden across this land many times while working at the ranch. He pointed at one part of the map. See this curve here? He said. Martha leaned closer. Yes. That looks like Dry Snake River, Ethan explained. It runs just north of town. Martha studied the map carefully. You might be right, she said. Ethan then pointed at another part. And these small shapes look like the Twin Rock Hills, he added. Martha's eyes slowly widened. Those hills are about 5 miles from here, she said. Ethan nodded. Exactly. The map clearly showed a path moving from Red Creek, past the river, and toward those hills. At the end of the path was a large X. Both of them stared at the mark. That can't be a coincidence, Martha said quietly. Ethan folded his arms as he thought. If someone buried something valuable, he said, this might be where it is. Martha looked at the gold coins again. Maybe those coins are just a small part of it. Ethan placed the map back into the pouch. For a moment, the quiet night felt full of questions, but something else began to bother Ethan. He looked back at the ground where the trap had been. That trap, he said slowly. Martha looked at him. What about it? It didn't look very old, Ethan said. The metal was rusty, but not ancient. Someone might have placed it there recently. Martha frowned. You think someone is still coming here? It's possible, Ethan replied. If someone had hidden treasure long ago, maybe another person had already discovered the place and was trying to protect it. Ethan looked around the dark land. The tall grass moved softly in the wind. The road remained empty. Still, he felt a strange feeling in his chest, like someone else might know about the map. Martha noticed his expression. You're thinking hard about something, she said. Ethan nodded slowly. If this map really leads to hidden gold, he explained, we might not be the only ones interested in it. Martha crossed her arms. Well, that makes things more complicated. Ethan smiled slightly. Yes, it does. He then carefully tied the pouch back to the saddle. For now, Ethan said, we keep this safe. Martha looked at him with curiosity. And tomorrow? Ethan climbed onto Ranger and offered his hand to help Martha sit behind him. Tomorrow, he said, we figure out where this map truly leads. Martha held on to the saddle as Ranger began walking slowly toward town. The quiet road stretched ahead of them. Above them, the stars filled the sky. As they rode, Ethan kept thinking about the map, the path, the mark, the hidden location. But far behind them, near the patch of dry grass where the trap had been placed, something moved slightly in the darkness. A shadow. Someone had been watching. The figure stepped out from behind a group of rocks and walked toward the spot where Ethan and Martha had stood earlier. The stranger bent down and touched the ground where the pouch had been buried. The dirt had been disturbed. The trap had been opened. The person's face remained hidden in the darkness, but their voice was low and cold. So, the stranger whispered. Someone found it. The figure slowly stood up and looked toward the distant lights of Red Creek. Well, the voice said quietly, This just became interesting. The night had fully arrived over quiet land around Red Creek. The sky was dark blue, and thousands of stars filled the wide western sky. The air was cool, and the wind moved gently through the dry grass. Inside the small sheriff's office in town, a lantern burned on the wooden desk. Its soft yellow light filled the room. Ethan Cole stood near the desk while Sheriff Dalton carefully studied the old map and the gold coins. Sheriff Dalton was an older man with gray hair and a thick mustache. He had been the sheriff of Red Creek for many years and had seen many strange things in his time. But even he looked surprised now. He slowly picked up one of the gold coins and turned in the light. "Well, I'll be," the sheriff said quietly. Ethan crossed his arms. "Have you seen coins like that before?" Ethan asked. Sheriff Dalton nodded slowly. "Yes, but not for a long time." Martha Bell sat in a chair near the wall, resting after her long day. She watched the sheriff carefully. "What do you mean?" she asked. Sheriff Dalton leaned back in his chair. "These coins look like the kind used many years ago," he explained. "Back in the days when outlaws were common in this area." Ethan glanced at the map on the desk. "Outlaws like the ones in those old stories?" he asked. The sheriff nodded again. "There was a group of robbers nearly 100 years ago," he said. "They robbed banks and trains across several towns." Martha leaned forward with interest. "What happened to them?" she asked. Sheriff Dalton shrugged. "No one knows for sure," he said. "One day, they simply disappeared." Ethan looked back at the pouch. "And the gold?" he asked. The sheriff tapped the map with his finger. "Some folks believe the outlaws buried their stolen gold somewhere before they vanished." The room grew quiet. The lantern flame flickered softly. Ethan slowly took a deep breath. "So you think this map might lead to that gold?" he asked. Sheriff Dalton rubbed his chin. "It's possible," he admitted. "The markings on this map look very old. And that X mark could mean something important." Martha looked excited. "Well, that sounds like an adventure," she said with a small smile. But Ethan remained thoughtful. He looked out the window at the quiet street of Red Creek. Then he spoke calmly. "Sheriff, there's something else we need to think about." Sheriff Dalton raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Ethan pointed toward the trap that had been brought into the office earlier. "That trap wasn't buried there by accident," Ethan said. The sheriff looked at it. "You're right," he replied. "Someone placed it there recently." Ethan continued. "If that trap had caught someone's leg instead of cloth, they could have been badly hurt." Martha nodded. "He's right," she said. "That thing nearly caused real trouble." Sheriff Dalton leaned forward. "So, what are you suggesting, Ethan?" Ethan spoke firmly. "I think someone might be searching for this pouch already." The sheriff thought for a moment. "That would explain the trap," he said slowly. Martha looked worried now. "You mean someone might come looking for the gold?" Ethan nodded. "Maybe." The sheriff stood up from his chair. "Well, if that's the case," he said, "then we need to be careful." He placed the pouch and map back on the desk. "For now, these will stay here in my office," the sheriff decided. "Safe and locked away." Ethan agreed. "That's probably the best idea." Martha smiled with relief. "Good," she said. "I don't think I could handle any more surprises today." Everyone laughed softly, but Ethan still felt curious. He walked closer to the map again. His eyes followed the faded lines across the paper. The hills, the creek, and the marked path all looked very familiar. He knew these lands well. Sheriff Dalton noticed Ethan staring. "You thinking about that map again?" the sheriff asked with a small grin. Ethan smiled slightly. "Maybe a little." The sheriff chuckled. "Well, if that map really does lead to something interesting," he said, "I have a feeling you'll be the first one to figure out." Martha stood up slowly. "Well, if there's ever a treasure hunt," she joked, "I expect an invitation." Ethan laughed. "You'll be the guest of honor." The sheriff carefully locked the pouch and the map inside a wooden drawer. For now, the mystery would rest. But as Ethan stepped outside into the cool night air, he looked once more toward the dark hills outside the town. Somewhere out there, the old map was pointing to something hidden, something that had been waiting for many years. And Ethan Cole had a strong feeling that this strange discovery was only the beginning of a much bigger story.